on. Hey,
Yay,
everybody,
yay.
welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward Erickson. Absolutely delighted to be here with you once again. I'm loving this every Thursday at 7 p.m. Showing up for you, breaking it down. We have a wonderful show in store for you with an associate of mine from Vancouver who's into erotic art and is going to help educate us about the toxic legacy of pornography, amongst other things. You can tune into Sex is Medicine, as I said, every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. on Contact Talk Radio Network. And of course, you can catch the replay on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, all your major podcasting networks. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and all of these other networks as well, because you get the audio version of Davey Doodlebug and the video version, and both are wonderful up in your ears and eyes. So my guest this afternoon, this evening, is Ricardo Scipio. And Ricardo and I have been playing tag for a few years to connect about his amazing artwork that he's doing and infiltrating into the realm of erotic photography and erotic art. And I know you from Vancouver connections. We have mutual friends, mutual connections, near and dear. And please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from, and why erotic art?
I'll try, although you're a very hard act to follow, but I'll try my best. I'm your friendly neighborhood sex photographer.
Woo! Hey, this is like Mr. Rogers.
There you go, exactly. I'm wearing a Mr. Rogers type, sweater. So yeah, like most people. Like anyone, no one's born a sex photographer. So I assure you, I was a normal person before I transformed into this thing that I am now. I was just a skinny, little kid from Trinidad. I was born in Trinidad, came to Canada as a little kid, had the normal, Black immigrant Canadian experience.
No, okay, so I'm going to pause you there because we don't know what a normal Black immigrant Canadian experience is. I'm from the States, and living in Canada is I know it's not perfect, but I'm this is like the Holy Land. So information about you, the normal Black Canadian immigrant experience, what is that like?
For me, it was traumatic.
Yeah.
I came from a country that's 48% Black and 40% Indian from India. I came from a country where, the president was Black and school teachers are Black, the bank manager's Black or Indian or a mix, et cetera, et cetera. And you come to a country where no one's Black. The prime minister has certainly never been Black. Never had a drop of non-white, non-rich, non-male, blood in their body. The bank manager, no one in any kind of authority figure was Black. And yeah, all of a sudden you're a minority, and being a skinny little kid with a funny accent and an Italian name, you get a lot of unwanted attention. So definitely bullied, beaten, despised, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would say not just a minority, but a vilified minority. So it's not just like minorities. That's a nice way of sanitizing racism.
Sure, it's not like I was Latvian. Latvians are a minority.
Yes, exactly, exactly. You weren't Polish.
Yeah, I wasn't Danish or German. Yes, I was a Black man from a little Caribbean country.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a funny childhood because Canada is the land of opportunity. So definitely you get a nice standard of living, even though we were quite poor. Being poor in Canada is not so bad. I'd rather be poor in Canada than pretty much anywhere else in the world.
Amen.
You get a good education if you want it. You get good healthcare. You get all that kind of stuff. Clean streets, relatively, crime-free. At least it was that in those days. But you also get the, sort of phoniness of Canada. Canada has always pretended that it was less racist than America. pretended there wasn't slavery in Canada. In fact, a lot of white Canadians that I talk to even now don't even know like how widespread slavery was in Canada and how Canada was integrated into that whole business. So yeah, you get polite Canadians that on the surface will smile and say hello and be friendly, but beneath the surface, you know, are probably more racist than Americans. I've actually had, I know I've spent a fair amount of time in the States, and I've actually had more racism in Canada than I have in the States. And I've actually, you know, we talked about this in our private conversations. I've enjoyed being part of a Black community in America. I've enjoyed going to places like Atlanta, that's 70% Black, and New Orleans, that used to be 70% Black before the hurricane. It's a bit different now, but those were amazing, you know, cities where, you know, it felt really good to be Black. There's no such reality in Canada. There's nowhere in Canada that's a Black city.
A Black Mecca.
A Black Mecca. And there isn't quite the sort of Black culture. I mean, if you think about things like music, what kinds of music have Black Canadians invented? None. Well, you know, what kind of...
Drake. I guess he didn't invent it, but Drake, he didn't invent it, but Drake is the man. You can't go dissing Drake.
Hey, did I diss Drake? And don't forget The Weeknd. Are you trying to diss The Weeknd? Are you trying to diss The Weeknd? No, but you know, I was saying invented. I mean, when you go to the States, you get jazz, you get hip hop, you get all, you know, even all these regional types of music and dance and culture. Because the hip hop down south is very different than the hip hop on the West Coast, which is different than the hip hop in New York. So
talk about diversity.
Talk about diversity, and same thing with the blues. I mean, Chicago blues isn't the same as the Mississippi Delta blues. You know, and you know, so yeah, there is, you know, so in Canada there have been remarkable Black Canadians. I mean, in jazz, you have someone like an Oscar Peterson, but he's Oscar Peterson. You don't have a legacy, you know, where you have everyone from Miles Davis to John Coltrane to Thelonious Monk, whatever. So it's a different thing. It's a different climate. It's a different climate. It's a different culture. And really, up until 1962, it wasn't entirely legal for Black people to immigrate to Canada. And that's another sort of little known fact about Canada. So
the racism is here, and what I find is that it's covert, meaning, which is the most insidious type, where it's literally just a anchoring of in the mindset of white superiority without it ever having to be challenged by the proximity of lots of Black people. So it's just an unrecognized, unacknowledged, unperceived orientation that white is right, and that exists in the States too. But what I find in Canada is that it is so deeply ingrained in the psyche, and again, it hasn't had the challenge. Like, at least in the United States, when you have all of the tension of racism and all of that, there's you have to look at it. You know, you have to at least acknowledge that there is racism, and that there's different layers and different aspects of it. And that conversation is rising more to the surface now. But what I find in Canada is that, again, it's never been questioned. The white supremacy and white superiority of the white Canadian mindset, it's never been challenged. And so therefore it's so completely normal that when it's actually pointed out, it's shocking.
Sure. And also, there's not an acknowledgement of what racism actually is, because the sort of white liberal sort of idea of Canada is, as long as we don't personally hate you or personally want to harm you, then you don't have anything to complain about. Well, what they don't understand is, to me, racism isn't about who doesn't like me. I couldn't care less if some racist doesn't like me. What I care about is, you know, is there a level playing field for jobs? Is there a level playing field for housing? Is there a level playing field for political power? Is there a level playing field in art? I mean, let's just take the art world.
Yeah, so I
I
was
went.
going to circle into that. So specifically, you being an erotic artist as a Black man in Canada, what are some of the special and unique challenges that you've noticed that you have to, because you've had that contrast, as we spoke in our personal conversations, you had the contrast of presenting art in majority Black areas like Atlanta and New Orleans versus the contrast of doing it in white neoliberal Canada and having to deal with that again, that covert racism. What are some of the things that you saw?
Oh, I started even when I was in art school. I went to the best art school in Canada, the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. And when I was there was only two non-white students out of 500. I mean, you do the math. That's pretty low.
Wow. Wow, two non-white. See, that's the way I grew up too. I grew that's where I grew up in Michigan. It was like me and one other dude. That was it.
Yeah, it was me and one woman, and that was it. All of our professors were white. There wasn't one single non-white professor. When we studied art history, there was no attention spent to African art. There was no mention even of African American art and the contributions of African American artists. So basically, you're treated like you're irrelevant.
Yeah.
And you really have no input in what's going on. And then when you get out of art school, you're dealing with the fact that no galleries are owned by people of color. No institutions are controlled by people of color. And you have no say in the agenda. And so you're basically left sort of begging. You might get a grant here or there if they decide that you're worthy of getting a grant. But basically, you don't have access to any power. And I'll just give you a quick example if you want.
I would love that. Yes.
So our government owned television broadcasting company is called the CBC. I guess it was our take on the BBC. When I was young, I was called into the CBC because they were getting in trouble for not having enough writers of color. And so I took a meeting there. And so I went into the boardroom, and the boardroom was older white people, I think 5 gentlemen and 2 ladies. They all had gray hair. Most of them have British accents. Some of the men were wearing tweed jackets with like leather patches on their elbows. I think one had a bow tie on. And they were quite genteel and polite and whatever. And so I had submitted a story that I wanted to develop with the CBC. And so the first thing they told me is, we don't want any us and them stories. We don't want any stories about how difficult life is in Canada for Black people. We want stories about how well people get along and how people are living the Canadian dream. And I was like, okay.
So you
I grew
want
up.
their version of reality, not Black people's version of reality.
I didn't want anything controversial, and nothing too spicy. So always wanting something fairly vanilla, and me growing up in the ghetto, growing up in government housing in Canada, that wasn't my reality at all. So I'd written a thing called BBMF, and so they asked me. They said, "What does the BBMF stand for?" And I didn't want to answer, and they kept pressing me, and I finally had to say, it stands for Big Black Motherfucker. And you should have seen their faces. And the reason I called the story that, and I didn't want to spell out the whole words, was a story about a guy who was a gangbanger, was a tough guy, and he spent a number of years in prison, and he's older, and he gets out, and he develops a friendship with an older guy that he had met in prison who's also out, and becomes like his father figure and a mentor and whatever. And the older guy tells him, don't waste your life. Look around the neighborhood and just figure out, what you can do that's positive. Mm-hmm. And he starts trying to figure out little ways of making his neighborhood a little bit better. And he becomes sort of a positive force gradually. It's not like some magic wand happened in his community. So that was the idea, that he was a big black motherfucker. He was one of those guys that could have easily spent the rest of his life in jail. But luckily, he didn't. He turned himself around. But I mean, the shock in that room.
Yeah.
It was not what they were looking for. So never. So needless to say, I didn't get that gig.
What do you mean? I'm shocked.
I was so shocked. I couldn't believe it.
You had it in the bag.
So so in Canada we get things like Schitt's Creek. I mean, that's the kind of thing they like to make in Canada. So no, they didn't want to.
Isn't that like one? I've never seen Schitt's Creek, but I've heard it's just amazing. That's
it is an amazing show, but it's one of the whitest shows you can see. There's only one non-white character in the show, and he is of no importance. No important character in that show is anything other than as white as possible. So, and I was talking to a friend of mine last week, and we couldn't think of a Canadian show, where people of color were the dominant characters in the show.
Yeah. So then for you as an erotic artist, because again, I mean, just being an erotic artist is going to be controversial. You're going to hit roadblocks and censorship. You're going to have to deal with all kinds of shit because erotic is like, sinful. But then being an erotic artist who's also black.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I've had just as many problems being a straight cisgendered man than being black, because that cuts the wrong way too. So I'm in all the wrong categories.
You're all the wrong. You just can't get a break.
I'm just all the way wrong.
You're born wrong.
I was born wrong. That's going to be the title of my autobiography. Born wrong. It's curious because being from Trinidad, I don't have the typical sort of European Calvinist view of sexuality. I never thought it was bad. I never thought it needed to be kept a dirty little secret. I never felt that women who were sexually expressive, were doing something bad. I mean, where I come from, hey, that's good.
More.
If a woman wants to have many lovers and whatever, we say, yeah, queen, go, do your thing. I mean, it wasn't, so the whole sort of wrapping sex in such shame just was so alien to me. And so when I started working in the realm of sexuality, I was always sort of hitting my head against, those walls where you're just supposed to go on the certain assumptions. So one assumption is sex is dirty. Another assumption is sex is private and has no place in the public, discord. Thirdly, that if you are going to present sex, you have to present sort of thin white people in their 20s. And if it's women, they have to have their ribs showing. That's very important, that their ribs must be showing.
Wait, what is that an actual thing? Or is that just like something you've observed?
It's not in the rule book.
It's an unspoken rule, though. It seems to be.
It's the standard. 90% of the nude and erotic photographers are white men.
And they like ribs.
They're obsessed with 20-year-old white women who are thin and have their ribs showing. And I can challenge anyone to go look at people's work, and that's what you'll see. And what you'll see is they pose these women and men too, like statues in these sort of artificial positions. And they use sort of the same 22 positions. It has often no bearing to what real sex and real, human interaction looks like. And when you look at the photos, you can't get a read on what these people's actual personalities are like, or if they have any kind of inner life at all. It's all on the surface. There's nothing from the inside, coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're like dolls being
they're
posed.
They're literally mannequins.
Mannequins, yeah,
and
mannequins.
They would be at home in any storefront in Amsterdam or something, in some red light district or something. So for me, it's just so alien. For me,
wow, yeah.
I like the real deal, and there's power in truth, and there's power in reality, and the reality is that diversity is the most powerful thing. So I love photographing people of all different shapes and sizes and colors and genders and identities and just everything. It's enriching for me as an artist. I would be bored if I was just shooting one body type or one age group or one orientation. But I think for presenting it to the public, it's good nourishment. The public is starving, literally, because what they're mostly seeing is porn or softcore porn, which to me is just as bad. And they're not seeing their reality reflected back to them. And that's sort of the chief job of an artist, is to go forth in the world and channel back to people what you see, what you feel, what you learn, what you experience. And through the unique sort of worldview of a particular artist, people's lives, can be enriched. Just, a couple of examples. My life personally was so enriched by listening to the worldview of Bob Marley and Marvin Gaye. Yeah. And they were reflecting back to me some real shit. And I think that's a good standard to hold yourself to, even if you fail to reach that level. Why not try? So you have to think about it like, if Bob Marley was a sex photographer, what kind of photos would he make?
And that's really like two things are standing out for me in what you're saying. Number one is in terms of this worldview and what is erotic and sexual, you coming from Trinidad, where your culture is this, it sounds like from what you described, you celebrate sexuality, you celebrate the embodiment and the expression of that vitality and that eros and the women, or, all shapes and sizes. So that is the standard for you. And then you come to, this culture where it's like anorexia is the standard. So that contrast is going to be really apparent for you. And like, so how amazing that the work that you're doing, you get to help transform that lens, because what we're normalized to, which is skinny white ribs, essentially, the McRib sandwich, is so alien, as you said, to you. And then also the other thing that's coming to me is diversity is actually the norm. And even, we're not even talking about like skin color diversity, but even just body type. Diversity is the norm. Like that one lens, that one view that you have to be 100 pounds, 5'6", blah, blah, ribs, implants, that sort of thing. That's a very small percentage of the people on this planet. The majority is all different shapes and sizes and bubbles and pimples and ripples and rolls and concave and convex. Like that is the norm. So I hear that imperative for that to be what we're able to consume as humans. It is nourishment. Just visually, our eyes are designed to like take in curves and the landscape and geography and all of that, and be nourished by that sensuality that we're witnessing. So I can see how that, and I'm relating and resonating with how the imperative of that being part of our experience of consuming eroticism is having this more organics and less artificial.
Totally. And if we take it out of the realm of sexuality and even put it in the realm of science, it's a well-known sort of scientific fact that if you don't have diversity, especially genetically, you get lots of problems. And if you look at agriculture, one of the biggest problems we're having is monoculture.
Monocrop, yeah.
and we need our farms to be more diverse so that the bees can thrive, and so we can be in some sort of balance. So
Shiny,
yeah,
happy people holding hands. That is the imperative. That's what nature wants. Shiny, happy peas and people and bees and plants holding hands.
yeah. So unfortunately, the world of eroticism and pornography is a world mostly of monoculture
Yes, thank
and
you.
and inbreeding. So not too healthy.
Yeah, wow. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the legacy that leaves when there is just this one lens that eroticism is being viewed through when it comes to pornography and mainstream sexuality, mainstream Western sexuality. There's one lens, and it's the lens viewed by one specific demographic of people. And then how does that create this toxicity in the field of sexuality, or in the experience of sexuality, I'll say?
Well, for one thing, it harms people.
Simple as that.
It's harmful. It's harmful. Visuals are very powerful. They're very, very powerful. So if you're a young person and you grow up and you're exposed to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of particular kinds of images, it can have a profound effect on how you see yourself and how you see the world and how you interact with the world. So if you're constantly receiving the message that that you don't belong, that you're not going to be celebrated, that you're not going to be appreciated, that there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with your hips, there's something wrong with your thighs, there's something wrong with your butt, there's something wrong with your face, there's something wrong with with your belly. Those are very destructive messages, and that's just on the superficial sort of body image-ish level. When you get into the levels of sexuality, when the way that you want to intimately connect with another person, you're being told is wrong, is not worthy, something to be ashamed of, something that you might get punished for. There's countries in this world where you can get killed for. That is a very damaging and dangerous message. Then as you're getting older and you're getting fed the message that people over 30 are not worthy of being looked at, they're not worthy of being worshipped, celebrated, whatever, that's also not a very helpful message. So the messaging is really toxic. It's almost like someone invented a message bomb and wanted to create as much damage as possible. You couldn't probably in a lab design a better weapon for harming people's self-esteem and harming sort of their place in the world, other than these kinds of messages. And the messages are not just in the realm of sex. The messages are also in music videos. They're in movies, television shows, in advertising. I mean, oh God, we could spend hours talking about what advertising's been doing to people for the last 100 years. So and the thing is, sadly, people aren't protesting it enough. People aren't challenging it enough. People aren't doing what they can to tear it down, because we're just so used to it.
Well, and in fact, in terms of porn, there's a lot of controversy because, I mean, there are, like, I just want to say that I support sex workers and I support people who love doing porn. And there's wonderfully now, thanks to like our generation and the millennial generation as well, there's different types of porn being produced. There's porn being produced by and with people of color. There's porn being produced that has it's a more feminist or ethical viewpoint. So there is diverse, I will say, or non-mainstream porn that is being produced by people now to fill that niche. And on the other hand, when I'm talking about the negative impact of porn, I'm talking about like mainstream internet porn, like your normal average, and that industry that's been in place since, you know, the Hustler and Playboy and all of that specific, you know, industry of porn, which is unethical, very patriarchal, deeply white supremacist, and deeply damaging, and has all these things that you're talking about, and particularly, you know, the body types. And I love what you said about, you know, being told your whole life, or when you're, particularly in the erotic realm, that like your body type isn't beautiful, even when it's just a normal body, you know, that it's not acceptable and beautiful because you don't fit into this little tiny box. But also the demonstration of the interactions are usually devoid of connection. They're usually, you know, there's not emotion being shared. There's really bad sex technique. And it isn't about the cultivation of mutual pleasure. It's about the orientation is getting off and entertainment. And that's great if you know that that's what you're getting. But unfortunately, porn is where so many people get, mainstream porn is where so many people get their sex education, quote unquote. And it's a horrible type of education to be consuming.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's particularly problematic for young people. There are two generations now who have had their whole sex education on the internet with porn. And I've seen in my own work, when I'm photographing couples, I can tell when I'm photographing them how much porn they've watched.
Yeah. Wow!
Because it totally changes how they have sex.
Yes! Thank you for saying that. Okay, go on.
It's now to the point where I'm interviewing people to decide who to photograph or not. I ask them, you know, if they watch porn and how much porn they've watched. And if they've watched a lot of porn, I won't shoot them. And I don't mean to be discriminatory, but I've just found that it just, you know, it totally changes things. And there's some people, for example, when I've started playing a shoe with them, they've said, well, you know, when we have sex, we normally watch porn when we're having sex. It's part of our foreplay. And I'm like, God help you, and no thank you. And you cannot be watching porn. Why don't you watch each other? I mean, why don't you, why don't you tune into each other instead of tuning into this other thing? So the sort of myth is it's all young men who get messed up by it. And certainly I've seen young men who just want to mimic a male porn star. They want to like pop some Viagra and just pound someone like their hamburger. And that's fine. I mean, I'm okay with pounding. I've done some pounding in my life. I can assure you.
You can always go for a good pounding here and there, you know?
I assure you, I've done my shit.
We're your manhood. I have pounded.
Yeah. Hey, give me a pound, Debbie.
Bam.
Excuse me, my light. This conversation is so dynamic. My light flipped down.
Oh
no. Okay, I flipped my own light.
I flipped your switch.
I flipped the switch. So sure, young men for sure. But I've seen young women, and with the young women, from the time they're preteens even, they're hypersexualized. They start dancing these, freaky dances that they see on music videos. And because you see them on the streets practicing these dances. And, I've got a young daughter myself, and it's alarming. Luckily, she's not into it so far, but, they have weaponized their own sexuality to get attention and whatever. And when you see their posts on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it's all this sort of part Miley Cyrus, part Kim Kardashian, part who knows what, sort of hypersexuality and hyper sort of self-awareness where you're always on and you're like, certain angles to hold your body, and you're always checking yourself out and whatever. And they have, and this is all generalizations, there are obviously exceptions, but what I find with young women that I photographed that have watched a lot of porn, they've bought into this idea of what women's sexuality is supposed to be like.
That's the key. It's not the, you know, the innocent and wholesome expression of sensuality and the exploration that comes, you know, when we're 12, 13, we're starting like, ooh, my, you know, chest is growing. Like, what does this mean? So it's not the innocent sensual expression of that. It's the buying into this artificial concept, this construct of what sexuality should look like, and performing. So their sexuality is performative as opposed to authentic. And that's the tragic legacy, I think. Yeah.
That, I think that is, you know, the tragic legacy, and it puts a lot of pressure on young women to be open to things they may not be ready for.
Exactly. Yes.
But,
and without encouraging attunement to their own bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could go down, we will keep going down the rabbit hole. But what I want to talk about now in our remaining time is how your work is the medicine, how your work is the antidote to correct this toxicity that we're discussing, because you specialize in authentic sexual expression and capturing that so that we have visual representation of all of these things that are lacking and missing from the mainstream culture. So let's talk about your projects. You have the sexual goddess art project, and then you've got another one with couples. So would you be willing to share about both of those projects?
Sure. 7 years ago, I started, you know, photographing people having sex, and I did 4 books, which have 689 photos of that. And yeah, I mean, I happily was able to get a wide diversity of people. You know, the project's always been very trans inclusive, and I was very happy about that. It's very age inclusive, from 20 to 76. There's many different body types, and I love the diversity of bodies. And that's one of the things that I learned personally from doing the project, is the body you're in has no relationship to your ability to give and receive pleasure. I've seen 360-pound people give and receive pleasure in ways that made me so envious. I was like, wow, I wish I could throw down like that. And I'll just tell you another little factoid. Every woman over 60 that I've photographed in the last few years has been a squirter and has been, you know, very multi-orgasmic. And I would never have guessed that. You should see some of these 16, 7-year-old people go. And it's given me lots of hope, because I'm 56 now, and I'm hoping, you know, that sex doesn't end in your 60s and 70s. And from seeing these people, it hasn't.
Yeah.
And it's also been inspiring to just see people adore each other. Just simple adoration. It does, to me, it's not about penetration. Sometimes people, when they see my work, they'll say, where's all the genitals? Like, if you want to see genitals, there's places where you can see genitals. I don't focus on genitals. I focus mostly on people's faces. Not to say that I'm not shooting full-length photos sometimes, but definitely it's not, you know, genital focus.
Yeah, it's not your point of focus, is the genitals, like porn. You know, that's a point of focus for porn. So what you're focused on the humanity of the person, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm photographing people. And the adoration that I've seen, and to be in the same room with adoration, is a religious experience. And I don't say that lightly. So it's just amazing. It's amazing seeing people that have been together for decades and how well they know each other and how well they know each other's bodies, and the sort of jokes that they tell each other that only each other can get, and the language they speak to each other that only each other can understand. It's been amazing. And I've seen amazing things with people that have been together for a long time. And I've seen amazing things with people that are getting together for the first time. I mean, some of my best shoots have been with people having sex for the first time. And it just showed me that if you are in the right spirit, you can connect deeply and profoundly, at any time with anyone. So I've learned a lot personally. That's one of the things I say in my writing is before this project, I thought I knew a lot about sex. Um, I knew nothing. I knew nothing, and I maybe still know nothing. Maybe there's so much more, still to learn, which is great. It means that I can continue on, the journey, that I haven't just reached some endpoint. So yeah, I did 4 books of the Sex Goddess Project, and in that, I was very open. I didn't know what was out there, so I just said that I would photograph people from all different walks of life having sex in many different ways. People have sex in many different ways for many different reasons. And I didn't want to be judgmental or put too many barriers on the project. So I was just open, and I photographed. And sometimes it was things that made me uncomfortable or things that, I didn't need to see. But a lot of times it was just so wonderful. But now I feel like I've done a good job with that, and I've moved on now, and I've just started a new project, which is called my Intimacy Project. And it still is a sex project, but I now have a much better idea of sort of what I personally like the most to photograph. And what I like the most to photograph is just simply love. I love photographing people that are giving and receiving love in whichever ways they want to do that. And even when I'm photographing people solo, because I do photograph people solo, I enjoy people that have a really healthy amount of self-love, yeah, and can self-adore. And it's actually one of the many things I've learned is, for a lot of people, it's harder to self-adore than it is to connect with another person. Some people, it's very uncomfortable just being by yourself and having to face how you really feel, yeah, about your body, how you really feel about yourself. So when people feel really good about their body and about themselves, then it's great. And our mutual friend, that was one of the things I really, liked most about her, from the beginning, because I started photographing her, I think 5 years ago. And she just had such self-love. and had this big smile on her face. And I was just like, wow, what a happy camper. and
loves to be filmed self-pleasuring.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Our first shoot, there was some epic photographs of just her in a bathtub, with herself, and epic proportions. And so that's what I'm doing now. Is I'm no longer, some people have sex for fun or just for the power dynamics, maybe dominance and submission or whatever. For some people, it's transactional or whatever, it's lots of different things. For me, for the new project, it's about intimacy. I'm photographing people that are willing, ready, and able to be open, to be soft, to, be very present, and to, be in the spirit of love, whether they're by themselves or with others. So it's going to be harder to pull off, but I like challenges, because even some of the people that I photographed having sex were perfectly happy to be photographed having sex. When I said to them, okay, now you have to do it, in the spirit of love and with intimacy and such, they're like, no, can't do it.
That's so fascinating. I find that I do find that so fascinating how myself included, how for some of us as human beings, it's easier to fuck than it is, just rub your genitals together, than it is to be seen.
Yes.
Right?
So when I tell people how I'm shooting, first thing I tell them is, before I ever roll the camera, they're going to do intimacy exercises. So they're going to, stare at each other, look at each other's eyes, synchronize their heartbeats and stuff like that. And some people are like, nope.
That's so fascinating, right? I mean, that was me like many, many years ago. Now it's like, I can't imagine not, like, if there isn't connection, then it's like fucking cardboard. I may as well, have my.
Well, the thing is, you have to be very naked to allow yourself to be in that state, and so you're very vulnerable. So for some people, they want a bit of a level of protection.
Yeah.
They want to, they want to have a bit of a defense up, and to be told, no, you cannot bring your defenses in there. You have to be completely open and completely vulnerable. That is daunting for some people, and really, it's just a mind fuck, because really, in reality, it's not daunting as long as you get your own mind out of the way. But if you overthink it and say, "Oh my God, this photographer wants me to be in this really raw state," and then other people are going to see that.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a
Oh, I
challenge.
can certainly see how it could be terrifying for the world to see you like that. I'm thinking like just in intimate connection with one other human being. Like I've been in experiences where since practicing Tantra, when I was dating way back when trying to do like, the harmonized breathing and eye gazing, where I'd have dudes be like, yeah, no. And I'm like, you want to fuck me, but you don't want to follow my breath? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I actually understand it. So what people have told me, because I've been talking to people, and some people have been really hurt when they've let other people in, when they've let their guard down. And so almost as a reflex, it's like, no, I don't want to let my guard down. I don't want to engage with you on a deep level. I don't know if you're going to hurt me. I don't want to.
I get that, but why would you think that you can have access to my vagina?
Because
right?
Because lots of people are willing to give access to their vaginas without that kind of deep connection. You're the anomaly. They're not the anomaly. They're more in the mainstream than you and I. We're the freaks. We gotta be realistic about that.
That's okay. We're building our tribe of freaks, and all of you on Sex is Medicine that also enjoy, not that you have to, no judgment, but who also enjoy authentic connection mixed with your sex. And it doesn't even have to be like, again, you're married or whatever. I've had authentic connection with one night stands that have been off the hook, but the key is the connection. The key is that there's this openness and this vulnerability and an exchange and a sharing. And that, it sounds like that's what you're modeling. That's what you're capturing with your work and modeling for other people. So I'm curious, how do we get our hands on these books? Because these sound like great. I want to put them on my coffee table, so when we have our family over for Christmas, we can have conversations about them.
Well, the bad news is you mostly can't get your hands on these books.
No, why not? Why would you tease us like this, Ricardo? What are you thinking?
I'm no tease. No, I mean, one of the things I had to be careful about in asking people to, give me their authenticity, or at least lend it to me, is I had to think about not, overexposing my work.
Yeah.
Basically, if I just put all these images out on the internet or whatever, what would happen? What would happen to the work, and what would happen to my people? So that's never been the idea. The project's always been for supporters and collectors.
Oh.
So with my book, for example, with the 4 books, each of the 4 books, there's only 300 copies of each book. They're signed, limited edition copies. So yeah, if someone wanted, to, be involved in the project and support the project, they can contact me and I can tell them how to go about doing that, and they can get a book, sure. But you can't just sort of order it on Amazon or something like that. It's not that kind of project. But
so it's exclusive.
It's exclusive. I wanted to, to cultivate a community of people that cared about the project and wanted to support it. I do some things, as outreach. Pre-COVID, I had 14 events where I would read some of the stuff I've written about the project. I would have a woman read some of the stuff the models have written about the project, because they've written quite a bit. And I would show some of the images, not all, on a flat screen TV. And then we would do like a 90-minute question and answer session afterwards.
That sounds
I love doing those.
Yeah.
And I learned actually so much about the project. I've actually learned more from feedback from other people than I've learned from myself. So those
Yeah,
have been,
that sounds amazing. I would love to set up something like that in Kelowna post-COVID, because that
yeah,
just
yeah,
sounds amazing and enriching. And so it's not just like looking at these pictures and like, oh, ha, ha, ha. It's actually an education.
yeah. And I've even done some of those, some of those, online as well.
Mm,
Um, but so yeah, so people can get involved, can have access to the images, but they can't just click a button and order.
yeah.
So I would encourage people to check out my site, sexgoddessproject.com. And if they are interested in finding out how to buy the work, or want to be photographed, or want to attend a future event, to contact me.
Yeah.
And doing other things and finding other ways to get the work out in a safe way, like we were talking about before this interview, the whole NFT idea. So next month I'm releasing 10 of my more sort of PG-13 images. None of these images have genitals, so if you're a genital fan, it's not gonna happen. So I have a small series I'm calling my love drops, because when you release something as an NFT, it's called a drop. And it's just 10 photos of people sort of kissing, looking at each other, adoring each other. And it's a way of introducing people to my work. So that's another way people can, start, getting involved and collecting the work and whatever, is to acquire an NFT.
So
So
will
with
the
these,
information about that be at your sexgoddessproject.com? So like if people are hearing this episode and they know that they want to have access to your work or an event in the future, they can just go to sexgoddessproject.com, and then that'll tap them into all the stuff you've got going on. Is that correct?
yes, and everything involves contacting me. For me, I have to have a relationship,
Yeah.
so no one can sort of anonymously buy a ticket for this or whatever. Everything has to, involve some contact.
Because you're
So
building community around this.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Beautiful. 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 Yeah. We are just about out of time. Before we go, anything you want to make sure that our audience knows about you and your work and all of that?
Um, Not necessarily so much about me, but one thing I, want to do is there's not enough artists and creative people, doing, sexual art. And I can understand that, because I didn't want to do it either. And I resisted for many years. I've been a photographer for 35 years. I've only been photographing sex for the last 7 of those 35 years. I didn't want to do it. I knew that there'd be some, backlash and, drama and controversy and obstacles and whatever. So I could understand some people's reluctance to do it. And not all creative people are going to have sex as their cause celeb, right? But I would just say to people out there, if you are a creative person and you are interested in working with sex, please do it, because there's not enough people doing it.
Mm.
And the world really needs it. If we think about it, if we think about human rights, we fought so hard for civil rights. We fought hard for the white rights for women. We fought hard for rights for handicapped people. We fought hard for LGBTQIA rights. We fought so hard for many different kinds of rights. We haven't been fighting for the right of freedom of sexual expression.
Nope.
There are no big campaigns for it. There is no Nelson Mandela type figure, leading.
Let's do it. You and me, Ricardo. Let's do
Yes.
it.
Okay, you'll be Nelson and I'll be Mandela. And
Yeah, there we go.
Together we'll be Nelson Mandela. But yeah, I mean, it's not, why is sex always being left out of the conversation?
Exactly.
We have to get over this collective hang up we have about it. Sex is important. We wouldn't be here without it. So I would, that would be the one thing I would say is please, creative people, start doing more work with sex, and just, however you want to do it. I mean, it's always going to be specific to your journey and your worldview, but we need more people doing it.
We need more sexual art.
We need more sexual art.
Because sex is medicine.
Because sex is medicine.
Yeah. Well, it's been so wonderful having you, Ricardo. And I look forward to chatting with you again on Sex is Medicine. Again, you are just a wealth of wisdom and information. And it's been a joy.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I hope it has been enriching for your eardrums and your brain and all the rest of you on every level, as it has been for me. It's always an incredible honor and opportunity to share this with you. So catch us next week for another wonderful episode. And in between episodes, make sure you connect with us on all social media at Authentic Tantra, our website, authentictantra.com. You can sign up for our free stuff. And make sure you subscribe to all episodes of Sex is Medicine in Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube, all the places. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Blessings. Mwah.